Hi everyone, Stjepan here after a tournament break. I played 2 tournaments since my last video and now I'm going to continue covering my games. Firstly, let's finish Rabac's Open. I still have 3 games to go. This is round 6. I faced a weaker opponent, and for context, I hope you saw my last video. Round 5 was played in the morning and I lost a devastating game with the black pieces, and I only had, I'm going to say, an hour in between games, or maybe 2 hours, but my memory is kind of blurry. In any case, had no time to rest or to prepare. My opponent didn't have many or any games online as far as I can remember, so I couldn't really prepare anyway. Resting after a tough defeat is also hard. So I'm going to show you the game. Before that, once again, I saw some comments on the channel about the recording break. As I told you before, when I'm playing tournaments, I'm not going to be recording, and you can assume that I'm playing a tournament if there are no videos coming out. I don't do anything except prepare and play when I'm at tournaments. I don't visit YouTube or look at videos or look at my channel or anything, and I just find it easier that way. So okay, after Rabac, I'm going to show you the 2 tournaments that I did play. Okay, so I started with pawn to d4, and I should say that the London has been serving me really well. Many people have been asking why I've stopped playing e4. I haven't stopped playing e4. In fact, e4 is still my main opening, but I'm going to be testing the London. My testing of the London is almost over. Then I'm moving on to the English, and then to the Catalan, and then to mainline Queen's Gambit. And that may sound strange, but I think that at my rating, what I play doesn't really matter. I need to test myself at every possible type of structure and figure out what suits me best. Of course, I'm going to have more or less experience in one or the other opening. It doesn't matter. I just want to have a number of games in each to be able to figure out what suits me best. So yeah, the London is not my main opening. I just picked it to be the first one to be tested. Okay, and soon I'm going to be moving on. Okay, my opponent plays knight f6. Now, against weaker opponents, weaker than me, that is, I avoid playing bishop f4 on move 2 against knight f6 because of c5, and I just don't want to enter these positions against a weaker rated opponent, lower rated opponent, because after knight c3 and queen takes b2 and this stuff, there are lines in which after a3, which is the only way to play for a win, black can easily equalize or be better, and I know them in depth. So in the event of them happening against stronger opponents, I can fight my way through them, or simply decline to play a3 here. I can just repeat with rook b1 and rook a1. But yeah, in any case, against opponents who are lower rated than me, I play knight f3. And this, of course, accepts d5 on move 2, which enters slightly better positions for black. If you're unaware of that, I'm sorry, I don't want to go into too much detail. But okay, I played knight f3. He played pawn to e6, and now bishop to f4 and d5. Now, of course, after e3, c5, c3, he has the option to go into those better positions. Knight c6, knight bd2, bishop d6, and so on and so on. And compared to what I usually play, I don't really want to have my knight on f3 here. Yet I want to have a knight on d2 because of some queen b6 lines. But in any case, since he played e6, at least there are no bishop f5 problems later on, which are the worst way for white to lose his opening advantage after knight f3. Bishop d6 played, bishop to g3. I don't want to trade pieces. And here, the normal way to play is just to castle. For black, white plays knight bd2, knight c6, and so on and so on. And we would have entered the main lines, but my opponent took on g3. And I was ecstatic to see this. After h3, white is always going to have a more pleasant position, regardless of what black does. The position I know after this, and I actually do know this position, is with queen to b6. And there are 2 ways to play this for white. One of them is to play queen b3, and after knight bd7, take on b6 and a b6. The other way to play is to go queen to c2 and prepare a4, a5. And this I analyzed extensively because, again, if you're facing a low-rated opponent, you don't really want to trade queens. So the line that I have analyzed goes a4 here, bishop to d7, knight b to d2. Black really should play h6 before castling, otherwise knight e5 is coming. So h6 and now a5. And if knight takes, which is the only logical move really, then you take on c5, the queen cannot take because of b4, and after queen c7 you go b4, and you should have more than enough compensation for the pawn here. But that's a different story. My opponent played knight bd7, which is a move I don't know, and here I think white is just better. Okay, knight bd2, he played b6, and this is a weakness that may seem normal, but I could have exploited it straight away. I played bishop d3, I should have played bishop b5 immediately, and after bishop to b7, knight e5, something like queen e7 and queen f3, and if castles I can just continue g4. So before black castles, if b6 is played, bishop b5 is almost always a useful move. I played bishop d3, he played bishop b7, queen e2, knight e4, and after knight e4, since he had undefended his d7 knight, bishop b5 is much stronger here, and I did play it. After bishop b5 here, I think white is very close to winning. Now, I did analyze the game with the engine since then, after having analyzed it by myself. And the engine gives it as +1, but it's actually so hard to play that the variation should be higher in white's favor, I believe. So bishop b5. And now castle's kingside is the only sensible move, and I'd expected that. After castle's kingside, I just castle queenside. Knight f6, I think either knight, probably knight df6 and now knight e5. And again, a very, very pleasant attack is coming and should be better for white. My opponent played pawn to a6, which is a simply bad move. So I take on d7, queen takes d7, I take on e4, takes, and now knight e5. And of course queen g4 is coming. He played queen c7, I played queen g4, and now the game is over. Excuse me. This position is just hopeless for black. There are a couple of options. Let's have a look at them. If pawn to f6, then knight g6. I don't want to take on e6 first. There's no need for that. I just play knight g6. And after something like rook g8, then I can take. And of course, this is... I just win a rook, so he cannot save his rook. Basically, I win an exchange instead of a pawn here. And if he castles, I can take on e6 first and then take the exchange. If he plays g6, then queen f4 is just crushing. Very hard to suggest a move here. I'm threatening knight g6. So for example, queen e7. Now I can just go dc5, and after bc5, I can castle queenside. And again, if castles kingside, the position is over after rook d7. If he doesn't castle, then his king is in the center. If castles queenside, after queen g4, then simply queen takes g7, and again, that's it. I win a couple of pawns, and the position should be over. My opponent castled kingside, which loses even quicker, and I have to admit that in this position I was lazy. So I saw ideas with rook h7, of course. So if I can take on h7 when my rooks are connected, it's just a winning position. It's just over. So let me show you what I mean. So let's say I castle and black does nothing, and I take on h7. So he has to take, and here, and goes back, and here, and that's it. There is no way to defend. So after castles kingside, if I'd already castled queenside, then the game is over after rook h7. So the question is, what happens after castles queenside? And that was my first intention. Well, of course, the move should be f5. Okay, now there are a couple of options. I can go queen h5, I can go queen g5, I can even go queen f4, I think. Queen g5, let's say, should be the best move. And again, the threat is the same. If, for example, rook c8, then rook h7. It's the same thing. The knight defends the f7 square. Okay, but the best move should be rook f6. And now, in my mind, I thought, okay, well, what do I do here? Rook h7 is not a threat anymore. Well, I can simply go rook h3. And after something like h6, I can just go rook h1. Cannot take my queen because I made him. Cannot move the king, cannot do anything. It's over. So long story short, I couldn't figure everything out. I saw that castle's queenside is a mating threat, but then I saw f5 and rook f6. So I ended up playing a really bad move, which doesn't do anything. It actually relieves the pressure from his position. I played queen h3, which seemed very simple to me. And of course, he plays pawn to h6. And now I thought, okay, he has to play h6. And after he plays h6, I have a pawn I can attack. I can just go g4, g5, open up the position and win the game. Okay. I castled queenside. And he took on d4. I have to take with the e-pawn, of course. The c-pawn is pinned. And he played queen e7. Now, queen e7 is a bad move because it allows me to go back to g4. What he should have played in this position after cd4 is just bishop to d5, excuse me, and after king d1, then cd4, ed4, and now just b5. And who is quicker? I mean, probably black is quicker. The engine thinks black is better here. I never would have guessed that had we arrived in this position, but black is better. So he took cd4, ed4, queen e7, and now again white is much better because I have queen g4, again threatening rook h6. And there is only one move, and that's why he played queen e7. He wanted to play queen g5 check. But the endgame is lost for black, which I saw luckily. So takes. And now there are two ways to play this position. I can play it with provoking f6 or without provoking f6. I thought provoking f6 is useful. I can do that with rook h5, obviously threatening rook h1 and then mate. So he has to play f6. The other way to play is just knight d7, and just after taking the pawn, getting the knight to a4, and having the same position with my rook on h1 and the pawn on f7. In the game I played rook h5, provoked f6, and then played knight d7. So here the same thing happened. Okay, and here he played rook d5. Now I don't really get much with rook to h1. In fact, I want my rook, which is now on h5, I want it back on h1, because his e-pawn isn't... well, his e-pawn is dangerous. Okay, I played knight c5, e5, knight b3. This is all fine. I had to spend some time calculating, but okay. I can also go rook dh1 here in this position after king f7, rook h8. That should also be okay. But I thought what I did was okay, and it was okay. Knight b3, bishop c6, d5, rook e5. If he takes d5, then I can take on g5, of course, and this way I get the d file. So here, knight d4, finally centralizing my knight, bishop d5. He isn't... okay, after rook h1, if he plays rook takes a2, he isn't threatening to take on a2 because I have knight c6, forking his rooks. So he played e3. Of course, I don't want to take that, activating his bishop and activating his rook, so f3. And this is just... it's going to take me a bit of time to clean up, but once I win the e-pawn, it's over. He played g4, rook he1, rook c8, rook d3, double attacking the pawn finally, rook ce8, defending, b3, bishop b7, he wants to play a5 and bishop to a6. That unfortunately does nothing because I have c4 blocking the bishop. So king d1, a5, king e2, bishop a6, c4, and now it's a very simple conversion. Bishop b7, knight c2. I'm gonna pick up the pawn, takes. He tries with rook h5, tries to infiltrate, but that really leads nowhere. Rook e3, rook h2, I just go king d3, and after rook d8 I go knight d4. He cannot take the a2 pawn, which I saw, and he did not. He took the pawn and the game was immediately over. It's hard to suggest another move though. I don't know what to suggest. The position is hopeless regardless of what he does, but taking the pawn is just immediately over. So he took, I exchanged rooks, And now if he plays king f7, he loses the bishop. If he plays king h7, it's slightly more complicated, but the bishop is trapped, and I'm just going to queen my c-pawn. In the game, king f7 happened, and after rook b8, bishop a6, and rook a8, he resigned. If bishop b7, then rook a7. And if he plays king h7, so as to not lose his bishop, I go rook b8 anyway, bishop a6, rook a8, bishop b7, rook a7 anyway, and after the bishop moves, I can just go g4, and this bishop has no squares. The bishop is completely trapped. The rook has no squares, no good squares that is, and my knight defends my two weaknesses, and I'm just going to move this pawn forward and then play rook a8 and then queen. So in the position after rook a8, my opponent resigned. So yeah, this was round 6. I have 2 more games to show you from Rabac's. I did not play the last round because my opponent didn't show up, unfortunately, and that keeps happening to me for some reason. So yeah, looking forward to showing you the other games. I should say that I won't be playing another tournament for a month and a half, so there are going to be daily videos for 40 days, something like that. Once I finish covering my own games, then I'm going to continue theory, finally. See you tomorrow. Stay tuned for more chess. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.